Time for our cup of joe. Just as we were beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel, well, that light which was starting to glow is now beginning to dim. Why? Because the Delta variant has emerged and it is spreading across the population. So, what is a variant? Let's discuss this. You've seen the pictures of the virus. Well, the virus on its surface has proteins, and those proteins engage what we call receptors on cells. That's how the virus gains entry into a cell. And in order for it to replicate, it has to get inside of a cell. Let me use an analogy here. It's the good old lock and key analogy. There are receptors on the surface of the cell, here represented by keyholes. The spike protein is like a key, and when it fits properly, it can unlock the receptor and it gains entry into the cell, then it can replicate. Now, the problem is that every time the virus replicates, there's a chance of making a mistake. What does that mean? Well, this protein on the surface of the virus, the so-called spike protein, is made up of a chain of 1,273 amino acids. Let me just represent it by this. Each of these little spheres here represents an amino acid. When the virus replicates, there's always the chance that one of these amino acids is going to be replaced by another one. So, continuing with our analogy here, you can see that there has been a replacement where this silver one has replaced one of the red spheres. That makes for a significant change because, as you can see here, this protein now doesn't fold the same way as this one does, which means that it may facilitate entry into the cell or, in fact, may make it more difficult. Well, it turns out that there are 4 such changes that can occur with this Delta variant, and those 4 changes or mutations result in easier entry into the cell. And then when the virus replicates, the spike protein now has these new amino acids embedded in it, and that makes it more infectious. It means that there's a greater what we call viral load. Because it replicates more easily in the body, there are more viral particles in the bloodstream, which means that there are more viruses being shed by someone who is infected, putting others at risk. What do we do? Well, the only way that the virus can cause a mutation is by infecting a cell. We have to prevent that. How do we do that? Well, by vaccinating, because the less likely you are to be infected, the less likely you are to somehow form a mutation. So vaccination is very important, and that is the way to reduce the risk of this Delta variant. Unfortunately, politics has entered the picture here. And whereas, of course, vaccination rates should be founded on science, it turns out that in the US particularly, it is based upon politics. This is an amazingly instructive plot where researchers have plotted counties in the United States, depending on whether they voted red or blue, that is Republican or Democrat, and percent of vaccination. And it is very clear that in states where people voted for the Republicans, the vaccination rates are lower. In Democratic states, the vaccination rates are higher. This is really quite tragic because vaccination rates should be governed by the science. Certainly, if you get vaccinated, it doesn't mean that you're totally protected. You can still be infected. However, it turns out that if you are infected, the symptoms are much, much more mild than in unvaccinated people. And it's very sobering to look at the statistics now and to see that virtually all cases in hospitals where people have ended up because of severe symptoms, these cases are all among unvaccinated people. So what is the message? If we want to do something about the Delta variant or other variants, let's go and get vaccinated. Thanks for listening. See you next time.